Well, I'm all pumped because we get to talk about my very favorite of the 12 powers today. Anybody catch what it is? Understanding. Understanding. So Paula has been hosting a group, open group, anybody that wants to show up any first Sunday of the month. And we've got 4, 5, 6 resources in Sacred Grounds and Books. And it's just an open discussion group that is learning about the 12 powers, what they mean, how to use them and apply them. I mentioned last week, what year was it? 1912, I think, was when Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore first wrote about the 12 powers. They're also known as our 12 divine freedoms, gifts from God, 12 faculties, powers, whatever you want to call them. The important thing is we know where they are, we know what they mean, and we know that every one of us, every human being came onto this planet with the 12 powers on board. The body point where we find understanding, this is, as far as I know, the only one of the 12 powers that the authors actually write about 2 body points. Front brain is one body point, and the other body point is our feet. Because, clearly, if we have feet, we stand on them. And if we don't have feet, then we get prosthetic feet, and we still stand on feet. So we'll talk more about why the feet are involved. Body point, the color is gold, which, Mr. Kennedy, I still have one of my 2 aura photos in my office, and there's this great gold aura, which I love. So the color's gold, and the associated disciple is Thomas. Probably the most familiar Bible story about Thomas is where Jesus apparently showed up in the flesh after the crucifixion. And do we have a distraction?
Yes, we do.
I'm not going to name any names, Linda. All right? We got that managed, Jim? Okay. So Jesus shows up in the flesh after the crucifixion, and he shows up in actually 3 of the Gospels. And they don't recognize him. The disciples don't recognize him, which is very metaphysically significant. So in this story, where he does show up and they finally figure out who it is, Thomas is like, show me the holes so that I know that it's you for sure. He touched his hands and touched the holes in his side. So the story about Thomas is he asked plenty of questions. I love that about him. I was kind of known for that in my spiritual education courses at Unity Village and in the ministerial program, especially in metaphysics. Jim Gaither would say, oh, and we have a question from Brenda again. And Thomas asked questions because he wanted a deeper, better understanding of what Jesus was teaching. So our definition of understanding is God, life, source, spirit, mind, principle. Am I missing any? Universe. There's another one I feel like I'm missing. God stands under all things. God stands under all things, which is why the feet are significant. Because if we're connecting with our divine understanding, we know that universe, source, life, spirit is the platform, is the foundation, is the anchor on which we stand. So let's talk about that definition. God stands under all things. I'm curious to know what comes to mind when you hear that. What thoughts arise? What does it mean for you? God stands under all things.
All things come from God.
All things come from God. What else comes to mind? Yes.
When
You have to holler, darling.
when you have something that is uncomfortable or you don't like, you feel like it's couldn't be from God, but it actually might be too.
So when we're facing something very uncomfortable that we want to run away from, that we wish weren't happening, that we, if we can't see it, it can't see us, then our first thought might be, oh, this can't be God, right? But it might be. Could be. One more. What other thoughts come to mind?
That because God is everything, that he's formless. That there is something that is formless.
Formless?
Yeah, the formlessness of, because you can't specify him as one thing. So he's everything, so he's formless. So he's peaceful.
Like we don't know if this is God
No, I mean.
or if this is God?
Right. Well.
Formless.
He has no specific form.
Yes.
So what I feel is a depth much deeper than anything that you see.
Yes, much deeper than that's the other word, substance. God is substance. It's the invisible energy out of which everything comes. And I mean, it's so much bigger, greater, so much more than we could ever begin to conceive. The easy thing for us to do is give God form, call it a he, and make it in our image and likeness. I don't know anybody that's ever done that, but I've heard about it. So to speak to what you mentioned, Dana, one of my recent, over the past, year or so, favorite phrases is, God is in the midst. Spirit is in the midst. Source is in the midst. Life is in the midst. Love is in the midst of even that, where, that joke about the child digging through a pile of manure and the parent asking what they're doing, and the kid says, with this much manure, there should be a horse under here somewhere. So it's like, we're a little random today. So it's like that. Even though it might not initially be evident, I think it's our spiritual task as fellow spiritual travelers. I think it's our task to look for source, to look for God, to look for truth, to look for principle. Yes? So this has much to do with activating our divine faculty of understanding, looking for God in it, whatever life brings. I'm not taking any further comments. Thank you for offering. So life throws us plenty of curveballs. Has anyone had one in the last month? Has anybody had one in the last month? Anybody had one in the last hour? Life throws us plenty of curveballs, and when we're not anchored, when we are not standing firmly in the knowing that God is in the midst, those curveballs can cause us to wobble. Yes? And, thinking of like a tree in the storm, sometimes they can bend way, way over and you think they're going down and they end up upright. That we're like that sometimes when we get the curveballs, and sometimes the curveballs knock us flat on our butts. Yes? Been there, done that. So I would truly contend that utilizing or activating or developing our faculty of understanding means that we process life events not from the mere human, earthly, relative level of life, but from the level that Nina's describing, from the level of something formless, divine intelligence, divine mind, omnipresence, omnipotence. With this faculty of understanding, we can begin to process what life brings from a much greater and broader spiritual perspective. And when we deal with life through the lens of understanding, we better be asking some questions. What is mine to know here? What is mine to know? Does that question cross our minds when we're in a challenge? What is mine to know? What is the spiritual truth for me in this? What is mine to learn from this? Some people call life school. Every day, every moment, every encounter is a learning opportunity. And one of my favorite questions, and some days I'm better at activating it than others, it's still one of my favorite questions. How can I navigate this from a higher spiritual perspective? That doesn't mean that I'm not starting at processing on the human level and working through thoughts, feelings, and emotions and so forth. That's part of the process to getting to the higher spiritual level. Who among us has faced a spiritual conundrum? That's what I love about Unity. We're willing to go into the rabbit hole of conundrum. It's one of my favorite places to hang out. Let me make sure I have the right book here. As I mentioned, we have several resources in the bookstore. This one was written by William Warch, and it's called How to Use Your 12 Gifts from God. And here's what Warch says about understanding. Whenever you meet something that you can't understand, it simply means you can't see the order, the good, or any purpose to it. We've all been there, right? Where's the order? Where's the good? Where's the purpose? In other words, you can't see how God stands under this situation. In reality, God stands under all things as principle. There is some principle in effect that you need to understand before you can have mental satisfaction. Is there any way to find peace of mind and heart without understanding all the details? Can we get ourselves to that place before we know all the whys and wherefores? The answer is yes. You can still yourself to divine understanding. This allows you to realize there is a spiritual law in effect, even though you can't detect it at the moment. And it kind of goes back to the formless thing. No, I don't necessarily say that I can see God. I can see evidence, and I choose to believe it is there, though I can't see it. My spouse would tell you that I don't believe it until I see it, especially when it comes to vacuuming. So activating our faculty of understanding is it's a process. It's a process of building a spiritual practice. Living through the lens of understanding is definitely a spiritual practice. And as Warch mentioned, our development begins with getting still and looking within to that faculty of understanding, trusting Because we all have to start somewhere when we're activating these 12 powers. And we may just know like cursory information about it. And for many of us, that's maybe all we need. Because when we are stilling ourselves to divine understanding and inviting this gift, this faculty to express, guess what happens? Spirit is at work on that. We don't necessarily need a lot of how to, we need the intention. Spirit as principle, spirit as law, spirit as mind, spirit as love, stands under all things. And I think most of us know that activating divine understanding is also more than just a mind job. It is about putting source in action. It is about inviting ourselves, opening ourselves to the activity of spirit, the divine energy pouring through us and from us as understanding. So when Jesus was getting ready to exit the planet, he was talking to his disciples about he was going to be going away, and he mentioned that story about in my Father's house there are many rooms. And most of the disciples, according to what they wrote, like didn't say a whole lot about that. And Thomas had questions. He's like, but where are you going? And how will we know the way to get there? These are Jesus's, the inner circle, his closest peeps, been following him now for up to 3 years. And Jesus is like, I'm heading out, and it's like, we need to go with you. How do we know the way? Reportedly, what Jesus responded is, I am the way. I am the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. This reference is one of a zillion times that Jesus, our master way shower, was saying, watch, learn, do. Watch, learn, do. I am the way. Heads up, eyes open, pay attention. Now, let us remember that when Jesus was walking the planet, Christianity did not exist, correct? And I'm going to hang on to an anchor just in case there's a lightning strike. And I'm ready to go. So just so you know, I'm good to go. So what I want to talk about is, I think in a lot of ways Christianity has turned that scripture like way on its ear. I don't buy the story that Jesus was selling some exclusive tickets to heaven. Amen. Whenever we go by a church sign that, here was a good one from several weeks ago, and I quote, sign on a church, outdoor sign, that said, ye cannot enter heaven unless Jesus enters you. Now, there's all kinds of levels of interpretation here. And I turned to my spouse and said, wow, what about the Buddhists? What about the Hindu? What about the Muslims? And Bill, wow. And Bill, a.k.a. Jesus, turned to me and said, tiny heaven. I don't believe that in his teaching, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Jesus was one of many masters. Jesus was one of many prophets. Jesus was one of many way showers. I am the way, I am the truth. I am showing you the way. I am showing you the truth. I am teaching you that you are all of that. And I believe that in his teaching time that Jesus did everything he could to point the way to the kingdom. He repeatedly taught his fellow spiritual travelers that all of us, all of humankind, no matter what religious sect we are born into or we have chosen, we all have within us the same gifts, the same spiritual capabilities, the same spiritual acuity that Jesus modeled in his own life. Yes? Yes. So I mentioned that we can activate our faculty of understanding by asking questions. And at least one of our authors, I think maybe two, I kind of have, they all run together, says that one vital approach to asking questions is to question our habitual way of thinking. Which brings to mind, for those of us who've been here for a while, a couple of years ago we did some teaching from Byron Katie, who teaches us to question our thoughts and question our beliefs. So part of this process of developing understanding is questioning our core beliefs and questioning our core issues. What do we believe about ourselves when it comes to worthiness? What do we believe about ourselves when it comes to allowing fear to drive the bus? What is our thinking and belief around the idea of shame, blame? Is our problem, our issue, our itch, somebody else's fault? So we have to invest some time in prayer and meditation, and starting with that primary question, what is the way? Where are you going? Thomas said. And how do we know how to get there? What is our way to peace? What is our way to joy, to contentment, to deep, deep understanding? And when we're in those weeble wobbles, another really good question is, what is the truth here? What is the truth of me? What is the truth of this other person? What is the truth of the situation? And we're talking again about going far beyond our little peephole in the baseball fence. We're talking about really opening ourselves up to a broader truth. Another good question is, what are the divine laws at play here? What are the spiritual principles at play? Going after these kinds of questions is what develops our faculty of understanding. And in studying all 5 or 6 authors, this, I think, is our golden nugget. This is Winifred Wilkinson Hausman, Your God-Given Potential. The awakening of our own faculty of understanding starts with questioning. Questioning the old ways of thinking that may have been taken for granted, wondering about the way and the truth, desiring to know above all else, desiring to know the spiritual truth. The desire for understanding leads to thinking about what is learned, then seeking to put it all together in a body of information that will provide a basis for living. So let's park here for a second and breathe into that. I'm going to repeat that second sentence, or that second part. The desire for understanding leads to thinking about what is learned, then seeking to put it all together for a basis of living. That's the golden nugget of understanding. And she goes on to say, understanding sees the relationship between the parts of God's universe. It perceives the operation of spiritual law. It puts everything together and comes up with the answers that stand under and support first the intellectual deduction, and finally the spiritual conclusion. The illumination that comes with increased insight also gives a feeling of lightness in the body, a release of darkness and heaviness. There will be a new understanding of yourself and your relationship to the world that may result in changes in your physical living habits, as well as your mental and spiritual activities. See why understanding is one of my favorites? So to wrap this down here, I cooked it down to 4 steps. What's her name? Was it Houseman? Has 7 steps. So we consolidated just a little. So step 1 to developing a spiritual practice of understanding: question our habitual ways of thinking. Be curious and be a seeker of truth. What am I here to learn? What am I here to know? What is the truth of this situation? So question. Number 2, grasp. Look for and grasp spiritual concepts, divine laws, and principles that are at play. Question, grasp. Number 3, meditate. Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, defines meditation: a steady effort of the mind to know God. Isn't that beautiful? A steady effort of the mind to know God. Question, grasp, meditate, and finally, illuminate oneself. The highest the highest development of understanding, a state of oneness in which we live in the light of spiritual understanding. So I invite us to lean into the universe, lean into the presence, the activity, the power of understanding. And wherever we're led this morning in the silence, if maybe the universe is presenting a question in us, let us follow that and see what unfolds. Or perhaps we're slipping into the silence and just giving our intention, giving our invitation to the universe, to spirit, to mind, to God, to open up in us those new rooms. In my Father's house, there are many rooms. In the silence this morning, let us be still and know that Spirit stands under all things. Be still and know that I am. Amen and amen. Divine understanding.